Hello, hello, hello. Wisdom of Womanhood podcast listeners. Thank you so much for being on the Wisdom of Womanhood journey with us. It really is a pleasure. We have so much fun, and I continue to get feedback. Actually, I'll start with this that I just remembered. My she's my cousin slash friend because our grandmas are cousins. Anyway, she's amazing, and she moved to Australia a few months ago, and she sent me a message today saying, "Do you know what's so lovely? Is I've been listening to your podcast, and it's like you're here with me."
Oh,
And I get to listen to your voice because I miss you. And I'm learning so much along the way. So I just love that, our messages and our hearts and everything are traveling all over the world and reaching the people that they need to, and that we get to, yeah, be with people through the beauty of podcasting. It feels
yeah.
very special. So yeah, I'm Showy, and lovely Pippa, who is coming up closer and closer to the arrival earthside of her beautiful baby boy, had a lovely idea today for our topic,
Yep.
all
Yeah.
around empowered birthing. It's been
Mm.
such a beautiful experience to witness Pippa in coming into becoming pregnant, the struggles becoming pregnant in the first place, showing up to the lessons that it's provided, and really consciously navigating through this whole journey. So it's going to be really great, yeah, to hear about what she has done, the pieces she's gathered, the practices she's using, the plans she has in place for her upcoming birth. And then I'm going to drop in some experiences that I had for my three births, that were super, super empowering. Some of the stuff I learned along the way as well.
Yeah, and before I go into what I've learned and my experience and insights, none of anything that I say is to shame anybody. If you've done whatever, if I've learned something and you did that and that was what you needed in that moment in your birth, I see you and witness you, and this is not even to shame anybody. It's a lot of it has been eye-opening for me. I've taken a lot on board with different experiences and how we've moved. And what I love about birth, especially New Zealand, is moving back to how we used to birth, our ancestors, how they used to birth, getting us off our backs. That's a big thing
Mm.
that I keep listening in birth stories is get women off their backs. Now, again, this isn't to shame people. Like some women need to be on their backs to
Yeah.
give birth. I've actually had this conversation with a lady who has been in midwifery for a long time, and now she does dueling and things like that. And even like I said, why have they not designed something in the form of like a hanging swing for moms who need an epidural because they obviously a lot of them can't feel the legs. And I'm like, why haven't they designed something where at least they're upright, like and hanging off the wall, like just and so I'm just I'm very curious with birth and I'm asking
Mm.
questions and I'm asking for other people's experiences and obviously within reason because some of it if it's traumatic I'm kind of stepping away from that at the moment because I'm very upcoming to birth, but wow, the stuff I've learned and to actually say out loud, I feel calm, excited, and empowered for my upcoming birth, no matter what it looks like. And I do have an open mind. I do have some wishes, and I do have some things that are a definite no, unless of a life or death situation. And what I love about my journey is that Chris is on board 1,000% and he knows and he's just going to be an absolutely beautiful birth partner. And I just know that because he's been doing the courses with me and the antenatal classes with me. And I actually did something last week, which I'm really proud of. So I hired a hypnobirthing coach and she's awesome. I'll give her a massive shout out. Lee Wen McRae. She's Welsh, but she lives in New Zealand. I met her at the baby expo and we just got on like you said with the interview, just like woo, like just loving this like energy with people you meet. Me and Chris had such a laugh with her every week we had the call with her. And the tools that she's given me and the stuff we've gone through each week has empowered me so much. And with the
Mm.
antenatal class, last week it was all about intervention. And I feel like I was already so equipped with the knowledge of intervention that I didn't need to go back to antenatal to rehash it. So I decided not to go. And I sat with it for 2 or 3 days prior to the class. And I just said to Chris, I just I don't feel like I need to go because I feel like if I'm sat in that energy again, because obviously sometimes in the antenatal class, they talk about some really, sensitive topics and things. And so she sent the slides yesterday of what she went through last week. And I glanced over a few of them and I just was like, I'm so glad I didn't go because I already know enough, I'm equipped with that. If intervention is needed, I know what's there. So the biggest piece of insight that I've taken out of what I've learned is my breath, what my breath's going to look like in birth, my
Mhm.
language in birth. So like I've like kind of completely took some certain words out of my vocabulary when it comes to birth. One of them begins with P and ends in N, and the other one begins with C and ends in N. So I'm using discomfort, I'm using wave, I'm using
Wow.
surge. And again, this isn't to shame anybody else who uses it. I'm sure the word might prop up by accident in my birth room, and that is fine. That is okay. But for me, it's just been about what would work for me. And again, like we just spoke about the last episode about manifestation, like words and language is really, really kind of powerful in these scenarios. So I've just been working through that. I've got some really cool. We're actually working on my birth plan over the next week, 2 weeks, because I want my mum to be here, so she's one of my birth partners. I thought I'll wait till mum's here and I can print off my birth plan and we can go through it so she knows my boundaries and she knows, kind of where we're at with
Yeah.
Chris and I. But just learning like one of the amazing things as well is I was thinking about something, and Rachel Reed is she's a big name in the midwifery world. So a lot of her books, The Rites of Passage, what's it called? Is it Birth as a Rites of Passage. I read that a few months ago and I love it so much. And I was thinking of something about how the toilet can be really like a great place for women to not just birth, but to
Totally.
sit. And
Yeah, it's really
Rachel was
good.
talking about it on the podcast.
Mhm.
And I was thinking of something before she said it. She said there needs to be more research around women birthing on toilets. And like I was thinking of like creating a bigger circle. So at least you can get your hands in. And she said like obviously it's not just about the bearing down because when you sat on a toilet, you naturally pelvic floors naturally relax to pee.
Yeah,
But
gives you a
she
few
said it's
raised
also an
sensations as well.
oxytocin boost because it's privacy. A toilet is
Yeah.
privacy, and that
Mhm.
boosts your oxytocin. So I was like, oh, and just learning this shit. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. And I remember like
Mhm.
when I used to have a lot of water infections growing up, being younger, and sitting on the toilet was like my best friend. God, I'd have a numb bum because I'd sit on the toilet for so much. So listening to Rachel, and then just a little personal story before I let Shawi give some of her experiences is uh, so if any of you listening have gone through this, which some of you probably have, is 2 weeks ago I was told that my uterus is measuring big. So as my midwife measured my uterus, I was measuring 4 weeks ahead. So I love my midwife. She's freaking awesome. She's got that
Mm.
holistic approach too, which I love. So she's got to give me recommendations. It's part of her job. But then obviously
I
she
love
knows I
it.
don't have to take it. So she said he's measuring on the big side. So I was like, okay. And I had a feeling he would be naturally bigger anyway, because his dad is 6'5". He's half Croatian. He's not a small man, I'm not a small girl. So I decided to take her advice and I went for a growth scan. And I was very aware before I went for this growth scan of what they would possibly tell me because I listened to a lot of Rachel Reed stuff. I've read some of her articles of what big babies mean and things like that. I got a lot of lovely comments back on the Conscious Mothers group in New Zealand of their experiences as well. So go for the growth scan was beautiful because I got to see my baby boy, and even though he's getting so big now because his little nose and his hand was here and he had a hand, it looked like he was stuck in his thumb actually because his hand was here. So it was just cute to see him, and she told me exactly what I would have expected to hear. My percentile and the comparison and things like that, and what they think he's weighing at the moment. So I just
Mhm.
took it with a pinch of salt, really. And then
Nice.
I took it into my own empowered state to do a little bit more research. So I rang the birth centers and things like that and said, hey, here's my scenario. I've got this potential big baby. It's my first pregnancy. There's no complications, no concerns. I've had a healthy pregnancy throughout. Can I still come to the birth center if I'm 37 weeks? Yeah, totally fine. So it put me at ease because like sometimes you can kind of sit there and go, whoa, and I just thought that gave me a lot of just clarity. But
Mm,
also, I think going through that experience of potentially having a bigger baby was that he may come earlier. I may need to go to hospital. I may need to have a C-section. I may need intervention. I may need this. And the thing is, it just made me realize that when it comes to our babies, sometimes I'm out of control with how he wants to become Earthside. And I think I've got a beautiful visualization in my head every night, like Shall we said with manifestation on the last episode. We have beautiful music Chris and I listen to, and all I think about every night when I go to sleep is how I want to feel in my birth, calm,
mm,
connected, empowered, and just staying in that calm presence throughout as much as possible. And however that looks from start of labor to when he comes out and I've got him on my chest makes me want to cry.
mm,
It's just as long as he's healthy and he's on my chest and however I did that, I'm okay with it. I think about like that moment of when I visualize it all the time when he comes out, no matter how he comes out, if it's belly or vagina, just that first initial like, and you felt this, and I'm yet to feel it. That first initial skin on
mm,
skin is like what I think about a lot, and it makes me emotional because I can't wait.
mm,
So, yeah, I've learned a lot, like just with books and different stories, and I follow some really cool people online. The naked doula, she's funny. She's got this it's called floppy face floppy fanny. It just makes me laugh because she teaches like different hypnobirthing techniques, and she
mhm.
said when you obviously like think about keeping a floppy face, like relax and then floppy fanny. It just makes
It's
me laugh.
true.
So you know and that boosts oxytocin because I'm laughing, and so I think the biggest thing I've done through my empowered birth is understand what's happening in my body at every process, and I know what's happening with my uterus. I know what's happening with my baby. I know the process because I'm a very visual person.
Mm,
And then what it looks like when he's here earthside, so I've had that conversation with midwife because it's a new experience for me and I can't wait to experience it. I'm just so excited to experience like I've heard that it takes you to limits you never thought were possible. And
amen.
yeah, and I think like I wonder what like I have pushed myself to some limits when it comes to like, life, but I'm like knowing I've heard that it just pushes you past, and then there's this
Yeah.
feeling of feeling like a superwoman, like
Mhm,
supernatural. And
mhm,
I'm excited to come on in a couple of weeks after birth to show you about my
mhm,
birth story and what that looked like. And then actually listening back to this episode and actually like, oh my God, he's here, oh my God. So I just feel really empowered. And I think my advice to anyone who's pregnant, who is wanting to be pregnant, or just in general, do research and take advice from other mums. Take what you need from that advice. Not all of it's right for you. Not everything's right for you. You will get a lot of judgmental mums, and that's with everything in life. If you're asking for advice, take what you need. You will know what's best for you and your baby. My
mhm,
intuition has been so strong through my pregnancy that I've taken some advice from my midwife. And after I had the scan, my next step would have been to go down the obstetrician route and have more growth scans, but I just said no. I believe your body would not grow a baby that you physiologically can't birth. And
no, you don't need to. There's
obviously,
nothing to gain from it. And
no,
he's going to
and
be
obviously
healthy
I had
if
to
he's
go
coming a
for
few weeks early anyway.
yeah, I had to go for gestational diabetes test, which I didn't want to at first. I turned it down earlier on in pregnancy, but I thought I'm just going to go for it anyway because it ticks a box off and I'm normal. So obviously, I know a lot of women who I've listened to their birth stories that had gestational diabetes and they had more, they were more at risk of this shoulder dystocia, but that's 5% of all women. And I think there's just this fear around birth is this, I'm going to use the word, that birth's this painful, awful experience that women can't handle and they need all this stuff. And it's like, it's just empowering women to be like, we've been birthing for centuries. We've been birthing since the dawn of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember someone saying on the podcast, and I've heard this before, if it was that bad, why are we still having babies? Why does Showie go on to have a second and third?
Mm-hmm.
So my biggest piece of advice I got off someone was it's all about the breath. And from what I know about my nervous system right now, and what I've learned through my trauma work is that if I let myself panic and go into fear,
Mm-hmm.
my nervous system's going to go into a fight flight response, and that's going to completely drain out my oxytocin because the adrenaline is going to be like everywhere. Blood from my uterus is going to move away to go to my arms and legs, to run away, to fight, to flee. I've got to stay in that calm. I'm safe. Another piece of advice I got was contractions can't harm me. They can't hurt me. They can't, they're doing a job. Like, so it's just, and then my favorite
And they
affirmation of
come
all,
and they go. And
yes,
they come and
and
they
they
go.
go like
That was one of my
waves.
mantras. I was like, here it comes, but that's okay.
It's
The
gonna
contraction's
go.
gonna come again.
And they said that you
Like,
get more rest time in the beginning. I know they ramp up in the transition
go.
stage, but it's like my favorite affirmation is every wave brings me closer to my baby boy.
Culture. Yeah.
And yeah,
Mhm.
it's gonna hurt like hell at sometimes because that's what birthing is about. Like it's
And
not gonna
that's
be like,
okay.
but it's
It's
okay. It's
okay
not gonna
to
kill
feel
me.
discomfort.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So there's lots more I could talk about, but just in general, like from what I've learned and taken from really amazing people, even friends. But Rachel Reed's a really big one. She's massive in the midwifery world and things like that. And what she's doing is awesome for mothers. And New Zealand is one of the top countries in the world for maternal care. Massive.
Yeah.
So I'm in the best place.
Yeah, we're very blessed, definitely. Even having all of the birthing centers now and home births being so much more accessible and
Yeah.
supported. So many midwives specializing in home birthing, and that has changed. When I was born, because I was a home birth.
Yeah.
Um, there were two midwives that covered all of like Hamilton, Waihi, Bay of Plenty, like the
Wow.
whole
Yeah.
area.
Wow.
So it's really funny because if anyone was born in that period of time, we were home births, like we all had the same midwife. Like I've met people and we're like, we all had Anne who birthed us.
That's crazy.
um, Actually, like funny story, like real quick, funny story on that. When I first moved to Tauranga, I had these awesome neighbors next door, like young couple about the same age as us, had a couple of kids. And then their mum was over one day and she was like chatting and I was like talking to her and she's talking about how she's a midwife. Turns out she is the midwife that birthed me.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know. Like, so this is Anne, like, and anyone that knows, like, Anne, and her son Adam, who like lived next door to me. We're having this chat, and then I showed her like a picture of my dad. She was like, "Oh, yeah, you were born in Waihi," like, because I bought this like house in Waihi, and it was just so funny. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you were the first hands on my body," and I just happened to like meet her next door. It was so
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, that was really
Yeah.
special.
It's awesome. Like,
Um,
yeah, I love there's birth centers here too, but we don't have them. They don't have birth
yeah.
centers in the UK. So
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Hey, like two things I wanted to touch on what you were sharing is, yeah, the lying on their back. Like the medical system is designed for doctor convenience. It is not designed to help empower a mother during birth or even the
mm,
best interest of the baby. And it's a system that so many, and this is like there's a little bit of heartache around the fact that so many women do not know their rights and the options that they have when it
yeah.
comes to birthing
Mm,
because they are not told them. And this is like one thing I would put out. Like, so my first was a hospital birth. We didn't have the birthing center here.
yeah.
And I wasn't at a stage where I wanted to have a home birth. I was like 20 years old
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
really didn't have the tools or the support at that time, which was perfect, how it was. However, I read this book called Birthing Without Violence, and it's a book from like the 80s that I was given. And even like at that age, it just like blew my mind to how shocking and traumatic it can be for babies
Mm.
in so many ways during birth, and how there's so many things we can do to soften that.
Yeah.
So what we did during my birth with Edie, and then we did this with all the others as well, that the boys were born at home, is all of the lighting was dropped right down. We did
Yeah.
as much as we possibly could to duplicate the womb. So we had the heat in the room at as close as we could to womb temperature. All of the lighting was down, like everyone was using soft voices, like everything was as much as a duplication for what they
Yeah.
experienced. Like my second was born in the water. And that was like these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. Like this beautiful little baby going from this experience and then having all the pressure of
I know.
birthing and then this clinical bright lights, loud sounds, like that's just fucking awful.
I
You know,
know.
and again, like with we don't know what we don't know, you know, and I'm thankful I knew that. But you know, if you are having a baby or thinking about it, like just going, oh great, let's give them as well as us the most empowered experience that they can have.
Yeah.
So yeah, that thing about lying on the back, it's this it just you know,
Well,
it's the convenience.
physiologically, you learn that in the tailbone, there's this little triangle bone that
Mhm.
I can't remember the name of it, but it flaps open. So it's again, it's the birth canal has to be as smooth as possible for baby to get out. So if you're on your back, that's actually that tailbone can't move out the way, like the little piece
It's
to
so
help
much
baby.
pressure
So
on the
it's again, it's
spine.
more pain for the woman because it's getting not stuck, but it's
Way more
friction.
pain.
It's not.
Yeah.
So it's like again, I know C-sections have to happen. I was born a C-section, so that's bright light. Like Jesus Christ, like they can't do a C-section in the dark. And I
Yeah.
understand like everyone's different, and I've got to have respect for that because I was born C-section, and
Yeah.
because my mum had complications with her blood pressure and things like that.
Mhm.
So I know these things happen, and my midwife's great where she spoke about like if that has to happen, obviously it's not what I'd want because again of what you just said, the bright lights, it's not mimicking the womb, but at least I can
Mhm.
do something about it after it when obviously I'm stitched up if that's how I'm
Totally.
meant to birth. You can only
Yeah.
do what you can with what you're given.
Mhm.
So I
And
think that's
that's the whole point though, right? What I'm
yes.
saying is that most women don't have any idea
No.
that these things are even options.
Yeah.
They don't know they can ask the doctors to turn down the lights.
Yeah.
They don't know that they can home birth. When I said to someone when I was home birthing my second, and I think I've mentioned this in the other episode we did on this, they actually said to me, "Is that legal?" She thought it was illegal to home
Yeah.
birth in New Zealand. And this is what I mean. There's so much misunderstanding around the options we can have to have the most empowered experience that we can.
Yeah.
Um, I remember having to lie on my back because Rocco got stuck. I almost had to go to the hospital with Rocco. We were like very, very, very close to it. And lying on my back for an internal examination, which was actually the best thing. That's when my waters fully broke. But I still remember going onto my back from being able to be moving it up on all fours. And I was like, fuck. Like, then I was like, oh my gosh, women used to get strapped down to
And
birth like
legs in
that. Like,
stirrups.
shit. Yeah, just
Yeah.
fucking anyway. That's a whole other thing that rolls me out. But the other thing I was gonna ask you about is so I did antenatal classes 13, 13 and a half years ago. Right. So like I haven't done them for a long time. Back then, super mainstream, you know, like there was a lot of stuff in there, some stuff that was really helpful, some stuff I look back and I'm like, oh shit, that is actually detrimental information. So what I'd love to know now is like, what are antenatal classes like? Are they super mainstream? Are they giving holistic options? Like,
Um, so
what is it like?
I'm not gonna name any names,
Yeah, okay.
but
Uh-huh.
my antenatal class lady, we had a little bit of just not disagreement, but I think I triggered her with some of the stuff that I was asking because what I do want to say is anyone who has never done hypnobirthing, it's not what it actually sounds like. It's not hypnosis. And this is what my hypnobirthing coach said. It should be called just the psychology of birth because the
Yeah.
hypnobirthing puts people off. I learned so much more from hypnobirthing than I have done
Mhm.
antenatal class.
Yeah.
Antenatal class hasn't taught me about my rights, what I can say no to, what I can say,
Mhm.
but it has talked about, which I really was grateful for, brain. Have you heard of brain?
I don't know what that is, but probably.
So my hypnobirthing coach told Chris about brain. So brain is the benefits, the
Yeah.
risks,
Hmm.
Alternatives,
Hmm.
intuition, nothing. And there's S for
Yeah.
space. So
Hmm.
if something's happening, is like go through that. Well, what are the benefits?
Yeah.
Well, what are the risks? What's the
Hmm.
alternatives? I'm using my
Hmm.
intuition. Nothing, do nothing. So it's kind of having that. So Chris has got it saved in his favorites.
Cool.
If you know,
Yeah.
for like for if the doctors have to come and whatever. But I didn't realize that you can actually say no to examinations. You can say no to constant
Totally.
monitoring. You can say no
Hmm.
to whatever, whatever, whatever. You can actually say
Hmm.
in the room, can you turn the lights down, please? Can you not come in
Hmm.
as much, please? Because obviously that's
Hmm.
disrupting you and your, you know. So I've learned a lot in antenatal class, but I learned a lot
Cool.
more with hypnobirthing.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
and again, like I said, I felt very proud that last week I didn't want to go to antenatal class because it
Mhm.
was rehashing stuff I already knew. And I was like, I don't want to sit there and having to go through all the intervention because it's very negative for me. And I'm just like, it just, I know it and I
And you
don't
already
need
knew
to.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that there's intervention for people. It's worked for
Mhm.
people. I know my mum had to
Yeah.
use intervention for my sister because she was a lot bigger when she birthed her naturally.
Mhm.
She got stuck, so she had to use forceps and things like that. But I
Mhm.
just don't want to give it any energy thinking about like if it has to happen, it has to happen. But I know enough, if that makes sense. So I
Mhm.
think, yeah, there's a lot there, and I think it's I'm using the free antenatal service because it was in Morrinsville here, but hypnobirthing is ultimately the most amazing thing I've ever invested in. And it wasn't even that
Mhm.
expensive. And I love how
Mhm.
she knows the rights and she's really helped us like understand like just the insight. And I've gone, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know
Mhm.
that. And the fact she knows it for New Zealand because the UK is different.
Yes. Yeah.
USA is different. Australia is different. So I feel like I can go into birth and be like, no, thanks, no, thanks. You know, even Chris, you know, because if I can't have, because I'm not, once you're in that primal brain, my decision brain's gone
Yeah.
out the
Yeah.
window. So Chris is very equipped, and I feel really confident in that, and he feels really empowered as well, which I'm just,
Cool.
oh, I can't wait to just experience birth with the love of my life. I've got to cry about
Mhm.
it. Just I can't wait to just
Mhm.
be with him through my birth because it's just he's
Mhm.
such an amazing partner and I love him so much. Experiencing that for the first time with him, you know, can't wait.
Uh, so yeah, you've just answered how I suspected you would,
Yeah.
which is what I wanted to gift to our listeners as well, is that often the antenatal informational education that is available, take what fits, leave what doesn't. And
Yeah.
also if you are wanting to have a more holistic birth or whatever, have a look at the other options and avenues that are available, because you
Mhm.
will not get all of the information
Yeah.
from those spaces that are there. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Some of the
Hey,
stuff was kind of it
yeah,
could have been dealt with a bit more however that word.
delicately.
Yes. Talking about the what happens after baby's born and the placenta being born and actually what that means. And she was talking about like the blood and it was like there was no warning. And I was like, okay, like, but I've heard from other mothers that it can be different for every mother. Like it's not it like you said, mainstream, it's about just the woman. It's not about Showy, Pip, duh. Every
Yeah.
woman's different. We go through the same process per se, like as in like different things, but every experience is different. And I wanted to kind of like reiterate that. But there was some little bits of like I had to kind of like not ask certain questions because I felt like her opinion mattered more, if that makes sense. Like it just
Mhm.
there was a little bit of and then I just thought the next time I go, I'm just gonna listen, just take what I need and then go home.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
asking the
cool.
questions was a bit like that's where I felt like a little bit like it was because she was the expert say it was like well why would you want that, why would you ask that, you know? So I just kind of like was like okay well I've got enough, I feel like I've got enough that I don't even need to go to my last two antenatal classes because
Yeah.
this week's breastfeeding, next week is postpartum, and I don't know, I don't feel like I don't need to go, but you know
Mhm.
I'll maybe feel into it on the day, but I
Cool.
just feel like I'm very intuitive with I was chatting to Mary, our friend Mary, and she said, like, you got this girl. She's like, even 5 years ago, like, if Mary was having birth now, she went, I'd be so much more
Mhm.
intuitive with her breath. And, but she
Mhm.
said, you
You've
got
got the
it.
tools.
She's like, you got
It's
it.
gonna
You're
be
going
how
to
it's meant
smash
to be.
it.
And as long as you're doing everything that's within your influence, it's going to work out exactly how it's
Yeah.
meant to be, right?
And things like people like you will inspire me. I know I said to Chris in my labor, I don't think I've told you this, but I've got a list of friends on my list
Mm-hmm.
that I'll think about in my birth, and you're one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I'll have like, well, oxytocin because I love you and you're my
Intensity
friend, and
energy,
I'll just
totally.
and like I'll think, oh, Shawty's done this 3 times. Woo,
Perfect.
I can do it. You know,
Yeah.
like Murray's one of them. She's had 2 births. Like, you know, I've got all these friends who've had babies, and I'm like, I got this.
Yeah, beautiful.
So you're on
Yeah.
my list. You're on my birth plan of like people I think
Yay, I love that.
about.
I will fully be sending my energy. I'll be doing Reiki. I'll be like sending it over there. um, this is actually so lovely because as you're talking, I was reflecting on things actually that happened during my birth that were super fucking empowering. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, awesome. So I might like share some of these pieces that have dropped in. That yeah, I look back on and I think, fuck yeah, that was so awesome. I'm so grateful someone told me that or someone supported me through that. Yeah, so first birth, like with Edie, I had the water, like water was so
Yeah.
therapeutic for me and knowing
Yeah.
that it was
Yeah.
rescue remedy, lavender oil. I think I gave you the tip, hey. So one thing that I did was I had lavender oil on a wet face cloth, like all through the face cloth. So I
Yeah.
just could have it there and just like
Smell
breathe it
it.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had rescue remedy and arnica. So it was just
I've
like
got those
taking them,
too. Yeah.
which you can't overdose on, by the way, guys. I would
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
I was just like, especially arnica for like any bruising and stuff afterwards, super helpful.
Mhm.
Um, and then I had a gym ball like in the hospital room with Edie, which was really, really supportive. So just yeah, some rocking and motion and movement around my pelvis and around my hips. Those were really supportive things. Um, I had a TENS machine actually in my first
I'm
pregnancy.
gonna
I
get
had
one. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so that was really good up until 3 centimeters. And it was great because I'm like, okay, there's something I can do right now. And I didn't, for me personally, I didn't have any pain relief, medical pain relief or
Yeah.
interventions or anything. But that felt really good to have because it felt like it just gave me that support leading
Yeah.
into it. And then from 3 centimeters, it didn't do anything. So that was fine. But then my home births were really, really interesting. Like my home birth with Rocco, I did birth in a pool because that's what I'd wanted. Interestingly, my Pisces is the one that was born in the pool, like the fish. So really, really therapeutic. He was the most challenging
Yeah.
in terms of the actual birth, because he got like all twisted and he wasn't
Yeah.
shifting, and I was getting pushing contractions at 8 centimeters. And so like again, this thing of like your body knows. It's like, well, actually, my body was a little bit confused. And so your body doesn't always know. However, it's just going, what can we do right now?
Yeah.
And my midwives were incredible. We had they used this, and again, like, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh my gosh, what is that? And you're going into birthing, like ask about these things. It was these scarves, and it's a Brazilian
Oh
technique.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that you use for moving baby. And so essentially I was like down on all fours, and they
Yep.
use these scars, they pull
Yep.
them and they like move them around.
Mhm.
And like just knowing that there were these like holistic tools available, that my team, because they were amazing, because I home birthed as well, you have to have two
Yep.
midwives for home birth. And I also had students with all of my births. So I had 3 midwives with my last 2 births. And yeah, so those things were really, really supportive, and I felt really good about them. And like, yeah, for Osiris, like squatting to birth was like really, really empowering and really supportive. That was the position that worked well. I was in and out of the shower, again,
Yeah.
like water. But yeah, that like, and I remember because we did the birth pause with the
Yeah.
boys, and yeah, so for anyone that isn't aware of that, essentially what happens is when they're born, and ideally they're either born and they have somewhere they can land to straight away. So essentially the least amount of intervention as possible. So for Osiris, he was born straight onto we like lay him down straight on the floor, and everyone stops.
Yeah.
Everyone just stops. We don't touch him, like just for a moment, like give him that moment in the world of just him. He's here, we're here, we all just stop, breathe. and then like pick him up and bring him up. Just these like moments. And I just like and one of the coolest things about that is that because everyone stopped and there were obviously all these chemicals and all these things happening inside my
Yeah.
body, it's so etched in me. Like that memory is etched so much. And there was fucking blood everywhere on the floor. But
Mm.
because we all stopped and really dropped into presence, that was really
Yeah.
powerful. And then the other really empowering things were with not so much with Edie because I didn't know as much, but really slowing down with the birthing of the placenta and with the
Mm.
cutting of the cord. That again is snipped way too early and they still have
Mm.
blood coming through. And as so many mamas don't know this, is that you actually shouldn't cut it straight away. But just giving it time. And I just like loved that those bits dropped in
Yeah.
and yes, there were things that I planned to go differently. However, being able to come away and go, okay, there were things along the way that we did what we could and then we tried different and they were aligned with me,
Mm.
my wants, which were around holistic as
Yeah.
much as possible. And so like coming out of them, like even all three of them, Edie was a not clinical because we really kept it as simple as possible at the hospital. When I look back, I'm like, fuck yeah, I feel good about them, and I feel good because I felt sovereign. Like
Yeah.
I felt like I had my autonomy and my voice was listened to. And gosh, I've worked with so many women whose voices weren't, and I really feel fear. And I'm so sorry, that you weren't
Yeah.
supported or given the options. And I suppose this is part of what we want to happen in this episode is like if you haven't yet, then there are options available and your voice is so important.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
if you have birthed and it hasn't been empowered, we also love you
Mm.
and just send you so much love to your experience and
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. And I feel like that's kind of like where I was at like now, like just having the tools and knowing
Yeah.
what's happening and feeling empowered in that setting that I've not ever been in before. And I think that's kind of where I'm at is like, people have said, "Are you nervous?" And I'm like, "No. What have I got to be nervous about? I was born to do this."
Yeah.
And I think like no matter what happens, I know I've got Chris as such a beautiful birth partner and my mum too. My mum's gonna be there, which is so beautiful because she couldn't be at my sister's birth because it was COVID and things like that. So my mum experienced in New Zealand birth as well because she grew up in the UK and my mum's births were quite traumatic with me and my sister, back then and talking to her about the birth on the back and it's making her go, "Oh yeah, it makes sense," because the generation of the change and things and she had epidural with my sister and just knowing my limits as well like it's just everyone's different and that's not again it's not to shame any mums like if you need an epidural you take that epidural girl like everyone is
But
so
let it
different.
be your choice,
Yes,
as
and I
opposed
think
to the very quick intervention that happened. It
yes,
still happens here, very quick
yes,
intervention,
and
as
who
opposed
knows,
to that check-in.
yeah, in 6 weeks time I could be telling you a completely different story to what I'm saying now and be like, you know what, I handled it and it happened and it was this, it was that. Who knows? And that's life, the unknown. I have a beautiful idea what my birth to look like, but
Mhm.
you might have a completely different idea. So
Totally.
I'm just keeping that flexibility, surrender, and that's kind of going into that manifestation episode, like that surrender and flexibility of like, hmm, I don't
Mhm.
know. So I'm excited to do a Earthside. I'm going to call it an Earthside episode with
Yeah.
Baba and I'll have him on me because I want to have that experience
Mhm.
where he's here. That'll be definitely my after birth when I'm feeling up to
Mhm.
sitting here and doing it with Showy, and it's going to be really cool to have. That's not far away.
I know. Ah, beautiful. I'm so very excited for you.
Me
It shall
too.
be an initiation, and you
Yeah,
feel ready for it.
yeah, I know.
Mm.
My hypnobirthing coach laughed. She said, "Oh, just working with you and Chris has been just such a dream and a breeze." And she went, "You make me want to have more babies now." She's got three, and she's like, "I want more babies now." She's like,
Mhm.
so yeah, I'll put her details in the show notes because she's been like a fucking rock for me. Like she's awesome. She's so awesome. And even like the aftercare now, we can talk to her. And Chris has got a number if you got any questions when I'm in birth and stuff. But she's brilliant. She's amazing. So I'm
The
excited.
one other resource I would mention is Sophia Pascal over this way, who is absolutely
Yeah.
fucking phenomenal. Mother's Circle on
Okay.
social media.
Yeah.
She is just amazing.
Mm.
And then also Carla Sargent, who is an expert in
Yeah.
birth trauma for
Yeah.
anyone that does need support in that as well. Those ladies are both phenomenal women in this space.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yay.
Oh,
Thanks
yay.
for listening, guys.
Thank you. We
Love
love
you.
you.
Mwah.